If you're a fan of fairy tale retellings and you want an Assassin Cinderella story, today we're going to be talking all about my novel, Cindrill. And today I'm going to be interviewed by author Monica Boothe. Monica, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited to talk about Assassin Cinderella today.
Oh, I am so excited myself. Okay, so when I read the description for this book, I was thrilled. So this is a Cinderella story, which who doesn't love a Cinderella story? But in this story, Cinderella goes to the ball, but not in order to dance with the prince, but rather to assassinate a member of the royal family. And
Yeah.
then she loses a shoe, and he uses that shoe to try and hunt her down, but not in order to marry her, but to catch her and execute her, right?
That's
So
correct.
I'm like, automatically hooked. I love this. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the inspiration? Where did you get this idea?
I always love fairy tales with big dramatic twists, and I don't like passive characters. I don't like girls running off to balls just to marry princes. I don't like them being the secondary characters in their own stories. And so I wanted her to be going to the ball with a purpose. So if she's going to the ball with a purpose other than to get a man, what could that possibly be? Why is somebody sneaking into a ball? Why does she have to be disguised? Why does she have to run away? What's the point of this story if not to get her man? And so I needed to give her a motivation to be there and then to run away. I like the deep, dark side of things. And so I sent her there to assassinate the king and his son at his engagement party. So he is engaged to a foreign princess. He is there to have this engagement party, and she is there to make sure that does not happen. She works for a master assassin, and they are there together. She's kind of the distraction, but she's also there to do any dirty work if she has to. Only he is kind of in charge of it. Her master is in charge of this assassination. And so as she goes into the ball, she kind of meets this foreign princess and realizes she needs to protect the foreign princess from her master that is just going to take care and eliminate everyone that's in his path to make sure he gets to his intended target. So I really love the idea of giving her a very dark purpose, having her run away, and then forcing her to work with him the next day when they run into each other without him knowing while she's still hunting him.
Wow. That- That's so awesome. So I want to know more about this character. So I love that she is motivated and active, and she's really kind of torn between these different things, right? She's trying to protect her master. She's also trying to protect this foreign princess.
Mhm.
And can you tell us a little bit? I know you don't want to have any spoilers, but can you tell us a little bit about her backstory? Like what has brought her to this place? What is it about her that makes her the person for this story?
Interestingly enough, we don't see a ton of her backstory inside of
Okay.
this novel. This is a novella, so it is a shorter story. We start right at the moment she goes to the ball. We know that she's working for the master assassin. Somewhere in her past, she has been placed in his care, and he has trained her and raised her to be another version of him. She's not quite at the point of going out to do this on her own, and she may or may not have unalived people in the past. We come to find out probably not as much because she's a little more on the hesitant side, but she also knows this is her job. This is the man she owes her life to right now for whatever reason. And she has to be loyal to him to a point, but she also doesn't want to hurt innocent people. So then, when she gets thrust into this realm of having to maybe go along with the prince and maybe help him on his mission to find her, even though he doesn't know it, she starts to question things. So we know she's got some connections from her past working with her master assassin. She actually has what I call a fairy god brother. It is taking place with the fairy godmother, and he is a guy who creates all of her technology, all of her wardrobe. And they're kind of like, I would consider them like foster siblings. They're not actually connected in any other way other than being really close friends and kind of have that brother sister relationship. But we know that he also doesn't love the deep dark side of it, and he is there maybe a little bit against his will as well. So now the two of them are going to have to figure out how to move forward, and what do we do? Who do we betray? Who do we work with? How are we aligning ourselves? And so she's got those connections to her past, but only her past under that realm of what her master is doing and how she's being trained.
Wow, I love that. So many wonderful tensions going on there. That's great. So you kind of just led me right into my next question, which is I see the Cinderella shoe, which is, so iconic. What other elements of the original Cinderella stories can we expect to find in this novella?
Yes, I love to put all of the main touchstones into the story, but I love doing it in a twisted way and I love doing it in an out of order way. So I'm a really big fan of making sure we have the things that are familiar. So we've got her shoe. Her shoe's a little bit different in this story because it's very fancy. It's very defined, and you're not going to find anything else like it. If you look at the cover, you actually see it's got some very interesting things sticking up. So when that knife cuts her across the foot as the prince is chasing her, falls and slices her foot open, it is going to leave a very distinct pattern. This is the woman that the prince is looking for. So as she trips, or as he trips and cuts her open as she's running away, she loses the shoe and he sees this mask fly off of her because we're in the future now. It is a sci-fi dystopian story, and we've got nanobots that had changed the shape of her face, which is why he doesn't recognize her the next day. So we've got the touchstone of not recognizing her the next day. The nanobots fly off and form a new shoe, and she is able to escape. Of course, we have a fancy outfit. We've got her stepbrother, her fairy god brother, who kind of creates her outfit, but her outfit is going to be very different than the Disney version of Cinderella, which, by the way, I'm actually friends with the Disney animator who worked on The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and a whole bunch of things, but his father was sent by Disney to France to study fashion to create Cinderella's dress and Mary Poppins outfits and a whole bunch of different things. So that's a fun little connection for me as well. And then we've got the princess, or almost Princess Cinderella, running away from the ball, him chasing after her down the steps, out into the courtyard, where she runs into her master and disappears. Now, from there, we have the next day him going on a search for our Cinderella character. And he does not recognize her because those nanobots had flown off of her face and moved down her body. He doesn't know who she is. From there, they go off on their own little adventure and come back to the palace at the very end, where now we're going to have to deal with her master still coming after them, her fairy god brother, maybe there to help them, maybe not. We're there to see what happens at the end of the ball and if they do in fact end up together, or if some people do not make it through this story. But we've got things like the dress and the shoe and the running away and the not recognizing. So we've got all those main touchstones from the original Cinderella, but we've had them in kind of a warped version.
Fantastic. I love that. I'm really interested, and you brought up just now this futuristic world that you've created, and I really love the sort of jarring juxtaposition that we have of like castles and kings and arranged marriages with nanobots and security cameras,
Yeah.
and all of this technology. Can you tell us a little bit about the world that they're living in?
I love a good technology-based world. I'm a techie girl. I started a web design business when I was 14 years old. I grew up with computers and cameras in my hand, and so I implement technology into everything possible. My love of my life is my dystopian, futuristic sci-fi stories with technology. And so we do have nanobots that are a little bit advanced for the time. So we don't see the king or the prince having access to the nanobots the way that Cindrill does. This is special for Master and for our fairy god brother to be creating. And he has worked very, very hard to create tech-based clothing and weaponry and different things that they can use on their missions to keep them ahead of the rest of the kingdom. So we actually step forward into the future within what they are doing in their assassinations, and everybody else still has advanced technology from what we have now, but not to the point of those nanobots, not the way that they work. So I've created kind of the staple world where they have that advanced technology, and then I step it up to a way that they cannot track her or understand what's happening or how things are working. So that gives her that creative edge so that they can be confused when they start learning these things and see these things starting to come out.
Hmm. So you've actually essentially turned the magic into the story, and the story into a technological component. And so I can see where that fairy godbrother
Yeah.
figure is coming in. I really love that. Something else I'm really excited about in this book is that it's written in a dual point of view, right?
It is.
So we're getting things from Cindrill's perspective and from the prince's perspective. And I always love a dual point of view, especially when you've got sort of these opposing characters.
Yeah.
It gives you so much potential for dramatic irony, and all those kinds of things. Did you have fun with that? Can you tell us a little bit about how you used that
I
technique?
love dual point of view because you get to see what each character knows and doesn't know. So I'm able to then reveal things that one of the characters doesn't know or doesn't know that they don't know. So I know that Cindrill understands she is on a mission. She is there to assassinate the man she is now helping. She gets to do things that don't look dark and dangerous, but we know because we see her thoughts and we see her actions that they are very rooted in the fact that she is going to unalive this person. And he has no idea. And so then we get to flip it on its head and jump over to Davian's chapter. And he is able to go through and interpret her actions in a different way than we know they should be interpreted. He sees her as somebody who's very strong, who is a leader, who's very good at tracking people and understanding people's body language and how they're interacting and engaging with the world around them. He interprets her movements, her words, the things that she's doing in a way that is less dangerous than he should be. He doesn't understand just how much of a villain she actually is and how dangerous she is to him. And she does. And she understands that he doesn't get it. So she does very specific things to kind of drop little hints, little breadcrumbs from him that when he finds out at the end, he can go back and find those and track her movements along the way, but he doesn't get it as the story is actually unfolding. So the readers get it and Cindrill gets it, but he doesn't. And we get to see his interpretation of her actions and what she meant and what she was doing to kind of gaslight him into feeling this false sense of security.
I love that. It's like a puzzle within a puzzle. You're watching someone put together the puzzle, but you're also putting it together yourself.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. I love that.
exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your process for writing this? I know that you have written a lot of fairy tale retellings. You've got some really exciting ones, like you've got Red Riding Hood, and you've got the Golden Trilogy, right, based on Goldilocks. Do you have a similar process for all of them, or are they each unique?
You know, it's really interesting because my writing process has changed a lot over the years. When I first started, I didn't really have a writing strategy. And then once I started writing my novels, I realized if I was going to be productive about this and be someone who is published and making income from my books, I had to be more professional about it. I had to make sure I had a very specific structure. So I taught myself how to write better, write faster, write stronger. And now I can write a full length novel in 9.5 days and have it to my editor on day 10 with only a handful of typos. But that's not where I started out. And so as I started to go through this process, I really learned what worked well for me and what didn't. I'm a planter. I like writing in between plotting and pantsing. So I know the main stepping stones of my story. I know my beginning. I know that strong anchor point at the end. And I know a couple of things in the middle. And then I figure out the little stepping stones in between as I write. So I very much like having staples and touchstones that I can write toward, having those anchor points that I can be writing my scenes toward, but then figure out the little things in between, the little nuances, the little conversations, the different actions, the different locations. I always get it back to those anchor points, but having those anchor points allows me to write a little bit stronger while I'm writing quickly because I know where I'm going and I make sure I have those places to get to. And then if I need to reevaluate and change things as I go, that's fine too. But I love being able to plant because it's a little bit of both worlds without being too strict on either side, without it being messy because I'm trying to figure everything out as I go, or without being super, super strict by plotting everything. So I really like making sure I know when I'm going into a story, I have to know the ending. Before I do anything else, I need to know what the ending is going to be like because that's where I'm writing to. That's what the entire story is leading up to. That's how I'm going to leave my readers. That's the punch that they go out with, the thing that they remember no matter what they thought of the rest of the book. So I have to have my ending. And then from there, I can figure out who my characters are and where they're going to be starting so we get that character arc. And then from there, I'm able to kind of figure out the rest of those anchor points. And then I can start my writing process. From there, I'm very, very strict about how I am writing on my screen. So I've got specific screens for the manuscript, for my timeline, and for my character Bible, where I list all my characters out. And then I'm able to just very quickly write those stories and make sure I go back and self-edit them and get them all ready to send off to my editor.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that you have kind of like these anchor points that you've got the beginning and the end, and then just kind of figuring out how they get there. So you mentioned that you kind of do a mix of plotting and pantsing.
Mhm.
What were some elements in writing Cindrill that surprised you, or you maybe deviated a little bit from your outline?
It was really interesting because I knew my ending. I knew how it was going to end, but I didn't know a good gap of it between when they were going to be out searching for my Cinderella assassin girl and when they were going to get back to the palace. I knew we were going from being out on the streets, being, dealing with a potential assassination, and then dealing with people who were coming against them. They end up fighting off other people and they have to run and escape and get back to the palace. I did not see the gap within what was going to happen in the palace. I knew that the palace was going
Mm,
to be the end, but it was actually a lot longer and a lot more fleshed out than I thought it was going to be because I knew they had to get back to the palace and certain things had to fall into place. But there's a good chunk of a scene that I didn't realize was going to happen. And I was able to get in some characters I didn't realize I was going to have toward the end of the story. So I was pretty surprised that those things popped up, but really loved how it turned out because that's one of my favorite parts of the story now.
I love that. The surprises often end up being the best parts, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wondered if before we wrap up, I know we've got a couple more minutes. Could you tell us a little bit about you and your origin story as a writer, kind of like how you came to the place of writing what you do write?
It was a total accident. I never intended to be an author. I was not somebody who sat there as a kid in school and tried to write my stories and do all these things. I never actively worked toward the publishing industry. But when I got out of college, I started my photography business. Now, I went to college for elementary education. I was a teacher and I was a teacher for many years. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to pay my bills. So I started my photography business. And then I just happened to get into the publishing side of the world. I just loved reading books and I ended up being very social with different authors and publishers. And I ended up having them ask me to show them how to take better photos of their books for Instagram. And so I was
Oh,
reading their books, I was reviewing, I was working with the different publishers, but then I started teaching them photography and social media marketing. And so I was involved in the publishing world. I heavily learned how to market books. I understood genres and covers and all of these things, but I wasn't doing anything with it for me other than to be nice to this industry. And so at some point, I was reading some books. I couldn't find another book that I wanted to read because I didn't know how to use Amazon properly back then. And I decided if I can't find a book I want to read to fill the hole in my heart, I am going to write it. It's just going to be for me. So I wrote my first book. And then it was fun, so I wrote a second book. And then it was fun, so I started on my Goldilocks retelling, which ended up being my debut novel. And at that point, it was like, if you're gonna keep doing this, you are going to have to start making money on this because this is a long process. This is a lot of work. So now you need to be a published author. So at that point, I had a whole bunch of books written. I knocked out like 4 or 5 books and I decided I was going to start querying. I did a bunch of research on querying and agents and publishing houses and all of those things. And I got a lot of contracts offered to me, but they were not good enough. I did not like the terms of the contracts. And so I turned them all down. And for a solid year, I did nothing with my novels. I said, they're just for me. It's fine. It's not a problem. And I didn't touch them until I found the right fit. When I found the right fit, then my books came up very, very quickly. I had 2 books come out right around the same time. They were just a couple of days apart. So I call them my debut twins. And from there, I was able to knock out a whole bunch of books. And over the last 5 years, I've had over 2 dozen books out. I've taken a ton of time off. And I've had the ability to do a lot of really cool things inside of my author life, but it was purely by accident and by happenstance and by the fact that I was just happened to be working in the publishing industry and helping all these authors and helping all these publishers so that when I decided it was my turn, I had really good, strong, advanced knowledge of the industry, which gave me this leg up to be able to get my books out into the world in the way that made the most sense for me and was the most financially responsible for me as well.
wow. That's such a fascinating story. Speaking of surprises,
Right?
sometimes the surprises that you didn't plan out in your life turn out to be the best part. So
Exactly.
that's awesome. So since you come from a photography background, do you do your own covers and all of that? Oh, that's so
Yep.
cool.
I've been a professional photographer for well over a decade and a professional designer for even longer than that. And I did almost all of my own book covers. I had one publisher that had to use their own in-house person. And when I got my rights back to that book, I was then able to do my own covers. So I do most of my own covers, most of my own work, and I do them for other publishing houses and authors as well.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for talking with me about Cindrill. I'm so excited to read it. Can you just clarify for us where we can find it and where we can find more information about you?
Absolutely. You can get your hands on Cindrill everywhere books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Kobo, all of the great places. It does come in both ebook and paperback. And you can go to cindrillinfo.kmrobinsonbooks.com, which will actually give you the aggregated links to all those places. So you can go to your favorite provider. You can get your hands on a copy of it right now. And while you're there, I have 4 other books that are out for free that you can grab too. And of course, you can come hang out with me at kmrobinsonbooks.com and at kmrobinsonlife on TikTok and on Instagram and on Facebook. And you can hang out with me at KM Robinson Books on YouTube, where we've got tons of behind the scenes books and stories. And you have the opportunity to see more interviews just like this. We've actually got one with Monica about her book. So you want to make sure that you are checking those out as well. Drop any questions and comments down below. And Monica, thanks so much for the interview today.
Thank you. It was so fun.